Hi there. So here we have a DeLonghi coffee machine. The model number is ESAM 6700. It's a few years old now. Still a pretty good machine, but unfortunately it's developed a common problem where the display basically stops working. So you can't really read anything on it anymore. So it kind of makes the machine unusable. So in this video we're going to see if we can get the display fixed. Now you can just buy a whole new control board for this machine. They're still available, but they're quite expensive. I think you could be looking at probably between 100 to 150 pounds or euros if you're able to get hold of one. But I'm hoping if we can just replace the LCD module and obviously get those for a lot cheaper, then yeah, we can save quite a bit of money. So yeah, next step is to try and get this thing open so we can get access to the display. So first thing to do to get this thing open is to remove the back cover, and there's basically three screws. There's one at the bottom, there's one here next to the power switch, and one at the top. And obviously make sure that you've unplugged this thing before you try and open this up. So yeah, let's get cracking and undoing these screws. See if I can do this with one hand. So yeah, first one out. Okay, I'll retrieve that off the floor later. Okay, so then I believe this thing should just slide up. Oh, screw out the way. It's tricky trying to do this in one hand. Oh, there we go. So this should reveal the, if I can move this off the cable, the insides of the machine. Okay, so I believe the next thing we need to do is to undo some screws here and here to remove this side panel, and likewise there's another two screws here and here. Where's that kind of hidden down there, which we're going to need to remove, and that will give us access to the side of the machine where hopefully we can unscrew the display. So I'm going to go and do that now because it's probably easier with two hands, and be back in a minute. So once you've undone the screws at the back, then the side panel pretty much just slides back and then unclips it and reveals the side of the machine. So you can see here there's two screws on this side holding the display on. Also there's a connector here, which is obviously from this main circuit board that goes up to the screen. So I'm going to need to disconnect that and take these two screws out. Let's have a look at the other side. So on this side where the water tank resides, once you've taken the screws out the back, you can basically slide this one back far enough to give you access to the two screws here. Doesn't seem to come off, so it's sort of attached somewhere, but we don't really need to take the whole thing off. So we just slide it back and then we can get to these two. So let's undo those as well, and then we'll get the main display and control panel off the machine. So once you've undone those screws, then you can just remove the whole front panel. Just worth mentioning that obviously this ribbon connector was disconnected, and there's also a connection here for the earth or ground, which you'll need to disconnect. So don't just rip it out. So to get access then to the control module, there's basically just four screws here, and then should just be able to remove this cover and get the board out. So let's do that next. So here's the control board removed from the machine. If you unclip this cover here for the lights, it reveals the circuit board, and you can see that the LCD module is kind of soldered onto the main circuit board via these pins at the top. I tried to actually desolder this but had a bit of a problem, so I ended up having to cut the board in order to get the pins off, but this is basically clipped in, and then you are able to remove the module from the main circuit board. So The problem you've got with this is obviously trying to find a replacement, because I think, I mean, there is a part number on the back here. You can just see it on there. When you look that up, you might find a data sheet on this, but other than that, trying to actually buy a replacement, I think these days is virtually impossible. So I had a look online. The closest I could find as a replacement is this module here, which we're going to try and fit. I'll put a link into the description with the part number and all of that. But there are some differences obviously with the old one. So for example, if you have a look, they are slightly different sizes. So the original one is slightly shorter. Width-wise they're about the same, but probably the biggest difference is the pin layout. So you notice here that the pins are on top, whereas here you've got the option of connecting the 16 pins on either side. If we just test it on here, you'll see that it kind of fits, but not really very well. So we're going to have to slightly adapt the board to be able to take this. There's no real chance of moving these original mounting points possibly on this side. It might be possible to drill a hole along to take it. So it's not going to line up perfectly, but like the old one did, but hopefully it should be good enough. So yeah, let's now figure out how to get this attached onto the board. So here we have the new LCD kind of mounted onto the circuit board. So because it's a slightly different size, I've had to do a few modifications. So this mounting point here is the original. What I had to do was drill a new one here, just using a 3.5 mil drill bit, just to get it mounted. And these other 2 points I've just basically trimmed the bottom of the clips, so they just basically just work like little feet now. It's only on 2 places, but that should be fine. The only other stuff I had to do was modify this diffuser, because obviously the screen's much bigger. So basically, I don't know if you can see it, but just here on these sides, these needed to be trimmed. And I had to basically shave off some of the plastic along here because the screen is just slightly bigger. The other things I had to do was cut out, let that focus, cut out some notches on here because the board is slightly wider, so on here as well. So basically now it kind of still fits, and you can see here where I've had to cut the sides out. Not a great job, but hey, you're not going to see it. So that goes in there now. Now you probably notice it's not perfectly aligned like the old one, so there's not much I can do about that. But if you offer up the old one just for comparison and line the holes up, you can see that kind of horizontally it's pretty much the same. It's just going across. The screen is probably, you could maybe say, 0.5 centimetre to the right compared to the original one, but it's not going to be the end of the world. So yeah, next step now is to basically I'm going to run some jumper wires from these pins here, and I'm going to solder them onto the original connectors. Pretty much I've looked at the pin out on this, and it seems to match the old LCD, so hopefully I should just be able to pretty much do, you know, a wire from 1 to 1, 2 to 2, etc., all the way up to 16, and then hopefully that should be working. The only other thing I had to do is, I don't know if you can see it, these pins were obviously a lot longer, so I've just kind of trimmed them down a bit so that I can, but I've still left a bit on there so I can solder the wires on. So yeah, next job is to find some wires and solder this all in, and then we'll come back when that's done. So the wires are now soldered. So I've just got 16 cables running from the display to the original pins on the main circuit board, and I just used some wire from an old printer cable I had lying around, which was quite useful because it's all nicely color coded, so I can tell which pin goes to which pin. So yeah, hopefully that should all be done. So we'll get this in the machine and see if it works. Okay, so moment of truth. I've just temporarily reconnected the control board back onto the machine with the display. So yeah, let's power it on and see what happens. Fantastic, insert ground container. So yeah, it looks like that's working, and looks pretty similar to the old one. So that's brilliant. So far so good. So let's put it all back together. So just worth mentioning, as I'm trying to put the board back in, because the LCD is a different size, I've had to basically cut away this kind of edge that was running along, because the on the old one it used to have more of a gap running around the screen, which I don't have anymore, so it wasn't actually going together. So I've had to basically cut and kind of grind away the plastic just to get this flat, and hopefully now I should be able to reinstall it, and then we'll see how it looks. So here's the machine all back together and working. So yeah, here's a close-up of the display. You can see I haven't inserted all the bits and pieces back onto the machine, so it's not actually working yet, but once I've done all that, hopefully it should be back in business. Yeah, I mean, overall I was quite pleased with the fix. It seemed to go quite well. The screen is slightly off from where the original one. It's not quite centre, but that's hardly a deal breaker, and you can see it seems to be working perfectly fine. I forgot to mention earlier, the screen, I had trouble ordering it, and it actually ended up coming from Germany, which cost around, in pounds it was, with postage it was probably just over £30. So yeah, not the easiest one to get hold of, but seems to work, and certainly a lot cheaper than buying a whole new control board. So yeah, overall pretty good. So yeah, hope you find this useful, and thanks for watching.